Welcome to WPS After Hours podcast, a presentation of the Public Information Office. We take you beyond the headlines to get the story behind the stories on the issues that impact you. In today's episode, we will dive into the role of the River Patrol Unit and how they safeguard not only our waterways, but also the Winnipeg trail systems, featuring long-term River Patrol member Ray Duma and Patrol Sergeant Stephane Fontaine. And now, settle in, grab your coffee. Here are your hosts.
Welcome everybody to WPS After Hours. Thank you for joining us once again. Today we are having an interesting podcast with our guests from our River Patrol Unit. My name is Constable Danny McKinnon with the Public Information Office. As well, my partner Constable Claude Chancy and our guest Patrol Sergeant Stephane Fontaine and Ray Duma, both from the River Patrol Unit. Before we begin, we will just do a quick content warning. Claude?
Good day, everyone. Information contained in today's podcast may relate to issues of violence or trauma, which could be distressing for some individuals. Be mindful of your well-being. Consider whether or not engaging with this content is appropriate for you. Danny?
Thank you. So we have Ray Duma. He's a senior River Patrol officer. He comes with 35 years of experience in terms of boating safety and education. And he has been with the Winnipeg Police Service River Patrol Unit for 26 years. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
And with us as well is Patrol Sergeant Stephane Fontaine. He's a 24-year veteran with the Winnipeg Police Service, very recently appointed to the River Patrol Unit as supervisor. 14 years with the Underwater Search and Recovery Unit, as well as an impaired driving countermeasures coordinator, which brings a lot of experience to the position he's currently appointed to. Welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you.
Who makes up the River Patrol Unit?
Well, the unit itself has been in existence for over 100 years, really. Patrolling on our rivers has existed for many, many, many years. I can tell you it existed as the Harbor Patrol up until 1998, 99 or so, when it was basically amalgamated into the Winnipeg Police Service and changed from Harbor Patrol to the River Patrol Unit.
Right.
And ever since, we've been obviously operating as a River Patrol unit, not only on the rivers, but also covering some of our trail systems around the city, including the floodway, for example, which we'll cover by patrolling with ATVs or UTVs. And in the winter, you'll see us on snowmobiles as well.
So it's not just a summer job.
That's right. For some. Now, if you're looking at complement, I have two regular or full-time members, Ray Duma and Mike Braco. They're there full-time. But as you can imagine, the need for more enforcement occurs during the summer time, which we bring in an additional 4 members to add to our complement.
And Stephane, what kind of training do all these members bring with them, or what's required for them to be able to operate in this unit?
Yeah, so just through the application process, they need some basic skills, such as their bronze medallion as a swimmer. But they also have to go through a test and show some basic kind of the boating safety guide that you would use to get your operator card. We test them through that. But once selected, we put them through a pretty intense refresher for some if they're returning members. But if they're brand new, we go through all of the different authorities that they have, the acts, regulations that they're expected to enforce, and then we do practical exercises.
I giggled before for two reasons. One was I remember getting my own bronze cross. I was a youth, early teens, and I was just thinking of these members who want to do this unit and go, oh shoot, I didn't have a bronze cross, and now they have to go to the YMCA or whatever other pool and get their bronze cross as a full grown adult. So I just sort of had a little vision about that I thought was funny. And then the other thing that came to mind, and I know this is just making a little bit light of it, is you always see the memes on social media about the test of a true marriage is launching your boat. So I'm sure you've seen, witnessed to quite a few different scenarios.
Yes. Well, we cover quite a bit of time on trailering and learning how to back up your trailer, or ultimately your boat in this case, and try not to end up on a YouTube video.
Exactly.
Right.
If somebody in the public wants to operate a boat, can you just run us through the steps? I know there's just an online boating certification, and tell us what other steps they need to go to before you get the operator's license. And then once you do, what do you need in your boat for safety?
Well, that's a great question for our expert here, Ray, I think.
Okay, Ray.
Okay. Basically, everybody who operates a motorized vessel in Canada needs an operator card. An operator card is much like a driver's license for a vehicle. That can be done very easily by multiple different companies that are online, or there's agencies that you can go to and write an exam. They're very short. There's not much. It's a basic boating test that allows that person to operate a motorized vessel. That's what we're looking for when we stop somebody. We're looking for their safety equipment, and we're also looking for that item.
What are the essentials for safety equipment?
Well, basically, as you start from a smaller craft moving upward in length, you need more equipment. But for the basic operator who's out with just a runabout up to 19 feet 8 inches is going to be required to have one approved, Canadian approved life jacket for everybody in that vessel. And an approved life jacket is something that is intended for that person. So that life jacket's going to fit him. It's not going to fit you. So we're looking for that. We're looking to make sure that life jacket's in good working order. So if there's any tears, rips, it's not going to be qualified. And also the last thing, it has to be either Department of Transport approved or Canadian Coast Guard approved. Now that's going to be within the garment itself. Inside the life jacket, if you were to open it up, you would see that displayed. Now if that display is not readable anymore, then again, that would be a life jacket that's not worthy.
So that's what you're looking at if you were to do a boat side check. But are all of the boaters required to wear it, or does it just have to be stowed on the boat?
Often when we stop a boat, people are scuttling around, and it's taking them 3 to 5 minutes to find their life jacket in a perfect situation while they're not going anywhere. If they were to get into a boating accident and someone's to be thrown from that boat, I mean, the chances, for them aren't going to be great without that life jacket on.
So can I go back a little bit towards, something that you said, Ray, about having just an operator's card to be able to operate a boat on our waterways? Maybe Stephane, maybe you might be able to answer this question. The licensing that is required for boating is not unlike we've seen. I might be dating myself here when, back in the day on motorcycles, you can write a test on, go in and write a test, 15 questions. You pass those 15 questions, and there was your license. You can go buy a very, fast motorcycle and go ride the streets. Is that what we're hearing here about boating? We've got some licensing requirements that maybe need some more development.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the reality is, as Ray was describing, you can go online. Many of them have like a little tutorial thing that helps you learn the information that's needed to pass the test at the end, and very easily, at a fairly low cost, you can end up with your boating operator card, which allows you to now navigate a boat without even having set foot inside a boat at any point in time.
Wow. Is there an age minimum for that as well?
There are age minimums when it comes to operating a boat, a motorized boat. 16.
That age horsepower restrictions, it falls under that.
The
Okay.
power, yes. Every boat that has a motor on it with in excess of or 10 horsepower or more is required to be licensed, and that you have your licensed boat numbers that are required on the side of your boat, and that is all linked to the size of the motor on the boat as well.
And there's certainly some challenges when we're, hitting the season now just before summer. And we have our spring thaw on the water. We have some debris on the water. Might have some deadfall on the water. Those are all those things that maybe you might not learn from reading about a course. It's experience, and I think that's an important factor to keep in mind when navigating the waters.
Certainly within the city of Winnipeg, we have our two major waterways, the Red River, the Assiniboine River. Everyone is very familiar about how quickly water levels go up and down. And ultimately, after large rainfalls, like we've experienced quite a bit this spring, we're going to see a ton of current and water levels going up to unsafe levels, because what used to be visible only a few days ago, as in old bridge piers or anything in the water, is now 2 feet under the water or hidden from sight. And if you didn't have the experience, or if you don't know that it's there, you're potentially looking at a recipe for disaster and some damage to your boat, which might put you out of service for the season, depending on how bad it is.
What about the speed limits? I know people might not think about that in a river system.
Back in the early 90s, we recognized a need for speed limits. We had 5 boating clubs within the city of Winnipeg, and we've had other user groups. We actually had 2 barefoot water ski groups also utilize our waterways within the city of Winnipeg. So we had to, have a whole meeting and find out what everybody's need was. And the reason we have 70 kilometers an hour during the day is the barefoot water ski people needed 70 kilometers to stay up.
Oh, right.
So that was the bare minimum, and that's what we gave them. So 70 is our daytime limit, and 50 is our nighttime limit, and that's on the Red River. And the Assiniboine is 37 and 10, respectively. And all our boat launches and marinas, rowing clubs and paddling clubs are designated 9-kilometer speed zones. And that's within 100 meters from either end of the property. So we're finding that once we had those speed limits in place, we still had to educate the people. Much like you hop in your car, as Stephane mentioned, you're coming upon speed limits. You're constantly be reminded of what the speed limits are. We have them posted at all the entry points in the city of Winnipeg, and often at the locations where the designation of the speed limits exist. They might be placed on bridges, or in some cases, actually on the riverbank on either end, adjacent to the boating clubs or the paddling association.
What type of penalties are they looking at?
Well, most of our legislation, if not all of it, falls under the federal legislation. It's just a constant speed. You get charged for speeding. It's not like a graduated speeding like it would be for vehicles. So if we come upon someone who's speeding, we stop that individual and we would charge them for speeding. We still see on a busy weekend upwards to 300 to 500 boats, especially on holiday weekends, plying our waterways within the city of Winnipeg. So there is a need for speed limits. People need to slow down. There's no brakes in boats, and our river system isn't that wide. and there's lots of turns, and then it gets magnified when you start talking about darkness, because then things really get precarious, or potentially.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely doing your part for educating the public, and we'd like to hope that this podcast does help as well in providing some more education. There is a segment of the population that do believe that our trails or our river systems are not being monitored appropriately, or they think maybe they might be able to get away with things, speeding and driving, boating recklessly. What message do you have for them?
Well, our mandate is to cover off on all those areas. We are doing as much as we can with the unit size we have. We are covering our waterways and also our trail system. The Hart Trail, the Transcona Trail, and our floodway are three main areas that we focus in. And if there's an area that dictates that needs us to attend to, then we're there as well. So we try to be proactive. We're trying to show that we're out there, and we're dealing with whatever we come upon.
And you have an ATV or a UTV or some potential machines out there to assist with this.
Yeah, we've always had some sort of equipment to operate on the trails. It was an unfortunate accident that happened. That's probably could have been, avoided. We have a great trail there that backs onto property there, and a young lady was walking and she was struck by a motorcyclist that was operating in that area, and it unfortunately resulted in her passing. So we make sure that we're there weekly, up and down that trail, and we're showing that we're there to keep people off of there. We enforce the Offroad Vehicles Act, and if we come upon somebody, then they would be charged.
Thank you. And I think it's important to remember the serious nature of some of these incidents and potential catastrophes that can happen. So it's good for the public to understand the inception of the trail piece and how the River Patrol maintains that.
Quite often we find when we're in these areas, there'll be people jogging or walking, and they'll see or hear our machine come up, and initially they're not happy because they think it's somebody that shouldn't be there, and then they recognize it's the Winnipeg Police providing more of a safe environment for them. Some of these areas we are up on, there's a lot of trees, and there's some areas that are not quite well lit, so it's good that we're up and down these trails. Not only the people that are utilizing, there's other people that might be looking for an opportunity to take advantage of someone. So if we're up and down those areas quite often, I think we're trying to provide a safer environment for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Could we talk about maybe the amount of rescue incidences maybe that you might have been involved with in the last couple of years? Like, is this something that we've seen an increase in? Is it fairly common, or more common than people think?
I don't think a lot of people generally know how often people enter the water in the city of Winnipeg, and we're often attend calls to those to get people out of the water or to rescue people who are in the water. It's between ourselves and the fire department. I don't have exact numbers, but it's quite often during the summer months that we attend these calls. It could be a couple calls a day to extract people from the waterways.
I know we've seen a couple of times on social media people floating down the river, on tubes, just for attention-seeking purposes. I mean, that brings you into the fray and the unit into the fray, and may attract a lot of resources as well. Maybe you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, well, we often see you do have your regular people who are operating in approved vessels that are doing the right things, and then you got other individuals that are out there in beach toys floating around, and we treat those just like a vessel. So you're going to have a life jacket, you're going to have a paddle, you're going to have the proper things to navigate. You just can't be floating around and other issues, if they're consuming alcohol, we will deal with that too appropriately. So,
Stephane, can you talk to us about consuming alcohol on the boat? I know we're not supposed to do it.
Yes,
You're coming
you're
across
100% right.
Yeah, you're coming
And,
across it though, aren't
yeah,
you?
well, and that's always been a concern. My recent introduction to the unit, I'm really putting an emphasis on that training for our members, what to recognize, and also how to deal with it. Right? To think that the impaired driving problem is only on our roads is a bit naive, because it happens on our waterways. Maybe not to the same extent, but it is certainly present on our waterways, and just as dangerous. We don't want anyone to get into any collisions or have any person overboard scenarios where people are now struggling to stay afloat, because things can become tragic very quickly. And as Ray mentioned, when an emergency scenario occurs, are you prepared to respond, and do you have the right life-saving equipment on board? But ultimately, our focus will be to ensure that our waterways are safe from impaired boaters, and we will be looking for that kind of those kinds of infractions, and dealing with them appropriately. Basically, you are not allowed to consume alcohol within your boat. There are some regulations that allow you, or some criteria that is required if you do consume liquor on a boat legally, and that's the boat has to be equipped with basically all of your amenities that your home would have: a bed, kitchen, an
like a
operating
houseboat.
toilet. It's got to be parked for the evening or attached to a dock. For the most part, people's boats don't have those amenities, which basically makes it pretty easy for us to say that it's simply not allowed.
Zero tolerance.
And it's definitely a zero tolerance for any consumption in your boat on our waterways. The consequences for impaired boating are very similar, if not identical, to what the consequences would be on the roadway. So you're placed under arrest. Depending on what the impairing substance is, we would do a breath demand, and basically off to the breathalyzer you go, provide your samples, and then you end up with a similar consequence of a court date in the future for impaired operation. You lose your driver's license, which may seem a little odd, but that is the consequence of blowing over the limit. You lose your driver's license for at least 3 months, and potentially at the end, after being convicted, you may be prohibited from operating conveyance, is the terminology, which basically means no motor vehicle, no vessel, no aircraft, no trains, you name it. You can't drive anything.
Your whole summer's shot.
Yeah, for a whole year.
Grab a bicycle.
Usually, yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about just some of the challenges. You've kind of touched on them a little bit about our river systems and some of the safety concerns. One being the currents. An unfortunate topic, but a realistic topic, is drowning. We do have a report, and again, we'll put it in our show notes, and it's in relation to Manitoba drownings, so not just specifically to our city water systems. But again, it's not surprising when we look at the numbers. We see relationship to not wearing a PFD or life jacket, a relationship with consuming alcohol, and of course, a relationship to people that are unable to swim or are very weak swimmers. At the end of the day, what can ultimately happen?
Well, I think there's a direct tie-in between life jackets, PFDs, and wearing them and drownings. I mean, people who aren't able to swim or swim very well, I think they should be wearing the life jacket in and around waterways. You never know what can happen, and it happens fast. So if you happen to fall out of your boat, your life jacket's gonna keep you afloat. Parents with young kids, often, it's hard to watch over your kids at the beach with other kids that are around. You put a life jacket on them. More often than not, they're going to be safe. It happens really quick, and if you don't find somebody in the summer months, if they were to drown, it's an unfortunate situation. So I'm a big proponent of wearing your life jacket. It could save your life.
Gentlemen, do you have any other messaging or points that you would like to provide our community?
I would suggest that someone takes the next step and takes a higher level boating instruction. Another thing you required is vessel licensing. Now, vessel licensing identifies the owner with the craft. Once you get your numbers, you have to put them on the front of your boat, 3-inch block letters on either side, and they must be contrasting to the hull color. Now, when we stop somebody, we ask for those two pieces, and it ties the boat to the owner. Often not what we find is that someone buys someone else's boat, and they don't do what's called the transfer of ownership.
Right.
So we might find 3 owners passed because that person hasn't actually gone out to do that. Quite often we find people are really excited to get out, especially in springtime. All their equipment's maybe put away, and they haven't identified where it all is. They get their boat out, they just want to get on the waterway, and all of a sudden they don't have their life jackets, or they don't have their vessel license, identification on board. So what we're asking everybody to do is just make sure you identify what you require for your particular craft. And as I said earlier, as the crafts get larger in size, you require more items. So make sure you identify what you need. It's on the website, Transport Canada website. You can identify what your craft is, and all the items that are required are on that website. And then get out on the waterway and enjoy the summer.
Yeah, have fun, be responsible. We're going to put a checklist in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very important because there's a number of items. You got the whistle, the bail bucket, the lights, the PFDs. Let me see if I get them all.
Pretty good.
What else am I missing? I'm just trying to think. Oh, paddle, just in case the motor dies.
Right.
And a flare.
Flares could be needed depending on where you are. And one other item you might have forgotten is you need a fire extinguisher if you have built-in fuel tanks or onboard cooking device. So that's what you require to have, a 5 BC for something that's 20 feet or less.
Thank you so much. I think we'll conclude here. We really appreciate you coming. That was great in terms of just a brush up for safety for the public, but also just to let everybody know that you're not just on the waterways, you're on the trail system as well.
And that the penalties are the same, whether you're on a waterway or the roadway. We're talking about the same.
It's the real deal.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Same penalties can come to you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to our guests. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to my co-host. We will see you again.
Thank you for listening to WPS After Hours. Highlights and links referenced in this episode can be found in our show notes. Please subscribe and share.